At one point, it was everywhere. And when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere.
Every country needs a Byju's. Businesses can fail. Entrepreneurs can never fail.
We threw the spotlight onto a company that's redefined learning.
EdTech major Byju's is looking at a US listing via the SPAC route.
Byju's then became India's first EdTech unicorn, that is, a company with $1 billion valuation, and its valuation continued to shoot through the roof.
EdTech major Byju's raises $500 million in a funding round led by Silver Lake. As per company sources, deal values Byju's at $10.8 billion.
I think this is the most valuable edtech startup that I've ever seen.
So let our children fall in love with learning. Download Byju's, the learning app.
The darling of India's startup ecosystem. Once touted as India's premier edtech success story. Valued at $22 billion at its peak, Shah Rukh Khan and Lionel Messi as brand ambassadors, a household name. And then, a dramatic downfall, a disgraced founder, corporate governance lapses, shareholder tussles, and then insolvency proceedings.
And it is true that when you grew so fast in 3 or 4 years, you didn't build the structures to make you a $22 billion company. You fell back on compliance, fell back on accounting, you didn't have a CFO, and the team that you had possibly could not manage expectation.
That's Byju's rise and fall in a nutshell. But for now, we see this story coming back into the news again. But for entirely different reasons. Byju's is on the auction block and two heavyweights have just entered the ring to fight over the discredited edtech major. There's Ranjan Pai of the Manipal Group on one hand and Ronnie Screwvala of Upgrad on the other. Both billionaires, both veterans, both with interests in the edtech space and both circling the same target. So why are Ranjan Pai and Ronnie Screwvala interested in this bankrupt edtech firm? Who's really leading the race? What happens next in the insolvency proceedings? Who's going to take a call on what happens to Byju's now? What really is the Akash angle? Is great learning what Ronnie Screwvala is eyeing? Is there a chance we'll see Byju Ravindran making a comeback? What is the Glass Trust and why is it important? We'll ask my colleagues Jessica Rajan and Manu Toms all of this and more in today's episode. There's a lot of tea to spill, so stay tuned. It's Friday, November 21st. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you are listening to The Morning Brief from The Economic Times. Now let me set the stage for you. Byju's parent company, Think and Learn, is currently going through insolvency proceedings. Basically, they ran out of cash, couldn't pay their debts, and now the court-appointed resolution professional or RP is accepting bids to sell off the company's assets to pay back the creditors. Up until last week, it seemed that this would be a walkover for Ranjan Pai-led Manipal Group, which had filed an expression of interest or EOI for Think and Learn. But then, last week, Ronnie Screwvala's Upgrad threw its hat in the ring. That adds a whole new dimension to this battle as two billionaires fight over Byju's crown jewels, which is Akash Educational Services and Great Learning. But let's start by getting our basics right. And for that, I turn to my colleague Jessica Rajan, who, by the way, was the first to break the story on Ranjan Pai filing an EOI for the EdTech major. Why don't you take us through what your sources told you about this expression of interest that has come in from Ranjan Pai's Manipal Group? Let's begin with that and then we can move on.
So, Manipal has submitted the expression of interest to bid for Think and Learn's assets. It is particularly interested in Akash. Why? Because
Manipal was already the largest shareholder. So what happened was that Byju's had signed a 2,000 crore credit agreement with Davidson, which was tied to Akash's cash flows. Now, the lender had flagged certain breach of terms and had sought repayment. So that's when Ranjan Pai stepped in. So he basically cleared the loan along with the interest. And that's how Manipal ended up with roughly a 40% stake in Akash. This happened last year when the debt was converted into equity in January. Since then, Manipal has been steadily looking to increase its ownership in the test prep business. So this year, Manipal bought additional shares from Blackstone as well as from Akash founder JC Chaudhary, who were technically minority investors in the company. Blackstone had around 7% and Chaudhary had 11%. So today, all in all, Manipal holds roughly 58% in the company. So if this goes through and they take charge of Akash, it will basically give them much stronger control over the business as well as make it easier for them to run the business smoothly.
Right. Now, couple of things based off of what you've said, Jessica. The first thing is, why don't you give our listeners an idea of, the Byju's parent, which is Think and Learn, right? It seems to be this large entity with multiple assets. Can you take us through the breakup of what are the different assets under Think and Learn and which are the high value assets from what you've understood?
During the time of pandemic, Byju's went on this massive acquisition spree, right? And they had acquired over 15 companies. So Akash is obviously one of them. Class Trust, which represents Byju's US lenders, who had technically lent them 1.2 billion, they have been trying so hard to safeguard Think and Learn's shareholding in Akash, which is around 25%. But the thing is that the company hasn't filed its financials since FY23. So based on its FY22 numbers, it had reported an 82% uptick in profit to 79 crore and a 45% increase in operating revenue. But we don't know the numbers for this year, but there's a lot happening within Akash itself. Like there are multiple applications filed with the NCLT as well as NCLAT. And the company is constantly even saying that they do not have enough funds to run the business. And that is why they're sort of going ahead with the rights issue. These people were going ahead with the rights issue at this point because they were trying to reduce the value of Think and Learn's share in Akash, right? Before going for bidding. And that is exactly what Glastrus was against.
Right.
This thing, so that they can maximize the value when it comes to the auction, the actual bidding process. And this year, it has also seen a series of top-level exits. Both its CEO and CFO also resigned this year.
And what about Great Learning?
So Great Learning is also there. And Upgrad is sort of eyeing Great Learning because that is into the higher upskilling space. While Upgrad is saying that it's only looking at the higher ed space, I think it is also looking at Akash because Ronnie Screwvala, who's the founder of Upgrad, said that the bidding process should happen first and then they should carry on with the rights issue so that any new owner is also given the opportunity to participate in the fundraise. Because what is happening right now is that they've already gone ahead with the rights issue.
Right. You actually came to my next point, which was this entire Ronnie Screwvala upgrade angle, right? So my question to you really is that why would serious players in the edtech space, who have enough and more resources and reason to stay away from Think and Learn, really want to acquire a bankrupt edtech company? What really is in it for them beyond that?
I mean, it's an interesting question. So I'll tell you why. If you look at Akash, Byju's bought Akash for nearly $1 billion. And now the same assets will be available for cheap. And the same thing we've seen played out with Byju's US assets also. So those were sold at a fraction of what Byju's had paid. And the money was then used to repay its US lenders. So one example is Tinker. Byju's had bought it in 2021 for about 200 million in cash and stock. And this year, it got sold in the auction for just $2.2 million in cash. And the other important thing is that some of these assets also operate in specific niches. Like I was mentioning about Great Learning, right? It operates in the upskilling segment. And it's sort of doing well because in FY25, it posted a 5% growth in operating revenue, and its operating profit also stands at 40 crore. And Upgrad is not only looking for great learning, but it is also in advanced talks to acquire Unacademy, which is not part of Think and Learn, but it's another test prep startup, and that is for like 300 million. So all of this also comes at a time when Upgrad is also sort of looking to go public in the next 18 months or so.
Right. We've seen an expression of interest from these bidders. Can you take us through what the process is now? Like, who decides who ends up being the one who wins the bid?
So right now, it's just an expression of interest. Both Upgrad and Manipal will also be reviewing the various assets of Byju's, the company's financials and other operational details. And honestly, submission of an EOI does not guarantee that they will be moving on to the next phase, right? The RP will still be reviewing all the eligibility criteria, and then they are the ones who are going to issue a provisional list of prospective resolution applicants. But that is going to be approved by the COC, like the Committee of Creditors of Think and Learn, which has all the financial and operational creditors, including Glass Trust. So Glass Trust is the one who is representing the US creditors, and they are the ones who have the majority share. Like they have around 99% voting share, and the committee needs to approve the list, and that's when this is going to move forward. So right now, the issue is that the process is getting delayed. The RP has again extended the deadline to submit EOIs to December 15th. So the original cutoff date was September 24. So sources say that the RP has not been getting many applications like the EOIs, and that is why he's been extending the deadline. But there are other sources who also say that it is because the RP does not have enough information about the companies, and that is why he is extending the deadline to get these information from the promoters of Byju's. And that is exactly why he has also filed an IA in the NCLT against the promoters of Byju's, saying that they are not cooperating with the RP.
But is there any realistic path left for Byju's to halt the asset sale? And I'm asking this because we've seen that there are pending cases in the NCLT, top that with ED scrutiny, plus the Delaware allegations of round tripping. So is that really a possibility?
There are certain IAs pending in the NCLT as well as EDCLAT. I mean, the only way to stop the sale process is if Byju's is able to repay the creditors, right? But it's very difficult because a lot is happening outside India as well. Like the $533 million out of the 1.2 billion, there are allegations being made that, round tripping has happened and the money has again gone back to Byju. So the Delaware development is also sort of happening at this point, and we'll have to see what NCLT and NCLAT eventually decides. But in case the settlement happens and Byju is able to repay the creditors, only then he'll be able to save his assets. Otherwise, this is the only way that creditors can actually get something out of these assets.
Right. And that seems like a slim possibility, right?
Right.
So, what are you hearing from your sources now, Jessica? I know that now there has been an extension of the deadline to almost, a little less than a month from now, right? And there could be more bidders who sort of enter the fray. What are you hearing from your sources on how this is going to go and who is really going to bag Byju's or rather Think and Learn?
Sources actually say that there aren't many bidders who are sort of looking at Think and Learn as a whole. But currently, as far as I know, Manipal is looking at Akash, while Upgrad is sort of looking at Great Learning, but they might be looking at other assets as well. But sources also say that there are 15 other parties who are sort of exploring in terms of submitting the EOI, but it's not very clear as to who is sort of going to get it. I mean, the resolution professional would try their best to sell the entire entity, but it again depends on the demand, which is not there right now. The assets that are on offer is Topper is one of them, White Hat Junior is one of them, but no one has really come out and said that, yeah, we are looking for these assets primarily. And there's whole Byju's learning app as well, which is there. So it will be interesting to see who's sort of trying to get a hold of Byju's as a whole.
And we're also seeing this entire resurgence of edtech in a sense, right? We've seen so many of them go public recently, Physics Wala being the most recent one. So maybe there is that resurgence of interest in the segment. And maybe you could throw some light on that as someone who covers, startups and so on. What is the sentiment towards edtech like right now?
It has obviously improved after whatever happened with Byju's, right? But right now, I think there's still not a lot of interest in the K-12 space. Like there are very few companies that are actually doing well. Like one of them is Vedantu. But other than that, a lot of investors are now looking at AI-led startups in the edtech segment, like these AI tutors or in terms of vernacular. So most of these kind of new startups are sort of seeing interest and are also like raising capital at this point. But other than that, I think the upskilling segment and the study abroad segment also seems to be doing well.
But there's so much more to this story. The US lenders, or the Glass Trust Consortium, who are owed over $1 billion, by the way, are currently the ones calling the shots in the insolvency process. And to put it simply, they're furious. Like Jessica said, there are active lawsuits in Delaware alleging that the Byju's management hid $533 million through round tripping. So basically, they're alleging that the money was moved to obscure hedge funds to keep it away from the creditors. So these lenders are not buying into the India EdTech story. They just want their money back and are likely to favor whichever bid, Pies or Screwwalas or even someone else's, who offers them the highest immediate recovery. But is it really that simple? To understand this better, I spoke to ET Prime's tracker of startups, Manu Toms. What do you foresee as the biggest challenges for these companies if they end up winning this bid?
See, the challenge is same for any potential bidder, because it's a very complex case, and some say there are at least some 20 interlocutory applications at the NCLT, and some of the submissions are potentially very consequential. For instance, promoters have asked for they made a petition asking for the dismissal of the RP, resolution professional, citing conflict of interest. And then they also had questioned the eligibility of Glass to be in the committee of creditors. So just in case, they get a favorable order at NCLT, this can potentially reverse the whole bankruptcy proceeding. Whatever order that emerges out of NCLT, there can be appeals, counter appeal, and people going to NCLAT and Supreme Court, so on and so forth. So there is a very likelihood of status quo continuing, this imbroglio remaining as it is till everyone loses their interest. So it can very well be a non-starter. I think that's the biggest challenge for anyone who looks at this asset.
One interesting aspect of this entire, saga is the role of Glass Trust, right? What kind of an impact will they have on these insolvency proceedings?
No, at the moment, as of now, Glass has over 99% voting right, and they call the shots, to say it simply. Their approval is crucial when it comes to the selection of bidders and the eventual winner of the auction. And also, an outside chance of them settling with the promoters if they get a better deal, and there could be an out-of-court settlement. Having said that, they also have to withstand the legal challenges that's being put up by the promoters. So Glass's role is important as of now.
The other aspect that I was reading a little bit about, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, is if this ends up being something that goes to Ranjan Pai, and if he ends up winning the bid, they've had like a long association with Byju's. So do you see the possibility of a comeback for Byju Ravindran in the midst of all of this?
Again, That's being floated as one of the possibilities, precisely for the reasons that you have cited. They have a long association. They have been engaging with each other for the past 1.5 decades at least. And Ranjan had helped Byju as recent as 2023 when he was in the middle of all his debt trouble, so he lent him a helping hand, so to say. And also, that deal was good for Ranjan as well. So the loan that he had given to Akash, which was then a subsidiary of Byju's, it got converted into equity, and he now has become the majority shareholder of Akash. So he has become the owner of Akash, so to say. So they have a very mutually beneficial relationship for a very long time. Having said that, need not be a reason for his comeback. I was speaking to some of the people of late, and they were saying that, reviving Byju's isn't as easy as it seems. So Ranjan's, primary interest is to ring-fence Akash. So not so much about, say, the remaining assets of Byju's. Therefore, while that is one possibility, I don't know if both players would be interested in reviving Byju's. That's a question that remains to be seen.
Definitely. One sort of question that came up in my mind based on what you've just said is about how Ranjan Pai has a large stake in Akash already, right? How does Ronnie Screwvala possibly taking over this entire think and learn space, how would that affect the dynamic with Akash, with Ranjan Pai being at the head? Will that be an uphill task for him?
Yeah, I see. That's the thing. I think the only thing that would be of any interest to Ronnie Screwvala would be Byju's other assets. At the moment, the interested parties are submitting their expression of interest, and they have time till December 15. Then the resolution professional will allow them to evaluate the assets. Then all the potential suitors will have a clarity on whether there is anything retrievable, useful, and monetizable in Byju's. And what is immediately visible as an interesting asset is the Think and Learn's minority stake in Akash. And if that's the only thing that has some value, I think Ranjan Pai is the front runner for that piece, and Glass might probably consider him over anybody else. I don't think Screwvala would be interested in just being a minority stakeholder in Akash. Therefore, I think Pai probably has a serious prospect here, because fortifying Akash is Ranjan's agenda, and recovering as much of Byju's debt as they can is Glass's agenda. And already we can see both are maneuvering to fulfill their goals. And there will, of course, be some tough negotiations. So I think Ranjan seemed to be in the lead.
So who is really going to land up with this distressed asset, and how is it going to change their fortune? Will they be able to stage a turnaround? These are all questions in my mind as well as the insolvency proceedings go on. But remember, this is an insolvency auction. The winner isn't decided by who likes the company more. It's decided by the Committee of Creditors, or the COC, the people Byju's owes money to. The creditors might just hand the keys to whoever cuts a bigger check, but no one can tell for sure. While that is not certain, one thing definitely is. TMB will be tracking the developments closely and will continue to keep you up to date on all things Byju's. Thank you, Jessica and Manu. It's Friday, November 21st. I'm your host, Diya Rekhi, and you were listening to The Morning Brief from the Economic Times. Also, we have a very exciting update. Corner Office Conversation has featured among the best shows of 2025 on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in as we brought you engaging conversations with the top minds driving the biggest businesses. So keep tuning in. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi and sound designed by Rajas Nayak and Indranil Bhattacharjee. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. Corner Office Conversation drops every alternate Monday, and our limited tech series ET in the Valley comes to you every Wednesday. All these shows wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. Happy listening.